All right, this time we're going to resume the meeting of November 20th, 2017. Councilmember Luna, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Clower?
Here.
Mayor Velazquez?
Here.
Councilmember Friend?
Present.
Councilmember Solario Luna?
Present.
City Manager Avra?
Present.
City Attorney Diaz?
Present.
Chief of Police Westrick?
Here.
And the record will show Councilmember Gillio is absent.
Thank you. Verification of agenda posting.
The agenda for the City of Hollister City Council meeting of November 20th, 2017 was posted on the bulletin board on November 16th, 2017 at 11:50 a.m. per Government Code Section 54954.2.
Thank you. City Attorney, do you want to report out from closed session?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there was two items that were discussed in closed session. Item number one was conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9b. And this one potential case relates to the 400 block referendum. No action was taken on that item. The second matter was conference with legal counsel, existing litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, and that's the pending Award Homes versus City of Hollister case that is currently up on appeal, and no action was taken on that item. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, one other order of business, if I may. Item on the agenda tonight as F3. We've had a request from the applicant to continue that item, that's a public hearing item, until the meeting of December 18th. I would appreciate if the council, if this is the pleasure, I have a motion and to move that to the again to December 18th.
So moved.
I need to recuse myself from this item due to a conflict of interest.
Okay, there's a motion to continue to the meeting of December 18th. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I believe there might be some of you here for that item, so you can feel free to hang around with us if you'd like. All right, we'll go to the consent agenda. Are there any items council would like to pull?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to pull item A3, 10, and 12.
I'd like to pull A4, A8, A13.
Okay, are there any items from the public?
No, Mr. Mayor.
All right, is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second? Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. We'll move to item A3.
Okay, yeah, this is for the pedestrian crosswalk report. If you have any questions, I'll answer them for you.
I was just looking at the pedestrian safety enhancement project.
Yes.
And I'm concerned of school districts and schools.
Right.
And to make sure that we have the proper, sidewalks or pedestrian crossing.
Yes, in terms of like the color of the crosswalks.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. I know, and then there's certain requirements, but I
Right.
really believe the safety of the children crossing to that school should be a priority with the city.
Right. In general, the crosswalks, they need to be yellow. The nearest point from a building of the school is no more than 600 feet. However, if there's special circumstances, they can be up to 2,800 feet away.
Yes. And one concern I have, Danny, is the crosswalk on Buena Vista Road.
Right.
It's a very busy street. We have the new Chispa apartments.
Yes.
We have a lot of children living there, and they have to cross across the street to go on to Calaveras School.
Yes. Understood.
That's a
I'll
concern.
work with Mike to try to take care of that.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a quick question, Danny.
Sure.
Have we looked at speed bumps in that area? Because I've seen them in other jurisdictions to where just before a stop sign or a crosswalk, there's a speed bump to slow people down.
Yeah.
I know on Meridian and Santa Ana, that gets pretty ugly when it's time to let those kids off. Just parents that are either mad because they're there or mad because they can't get through.
Yeah. No, we haven't really looked at speed bumps in that area. However, there may be something that we can take a look at in the future.
Councilmember, Vice Mayor Clower?
Can you just give us, if once it's approved, the next steps to actually get it implemented and
Yes.
see these things happen?
The next step would be to go ahead and start the design plans and finalize them and take it to construction. Our previous staff report to council authorized the report and the design. This project is eligible for our step reimbursements. So after the approval of the report, we'll prepare the design plans and move forward with construction implementation.
Okay, and then we still have the speed survey results coming in the near future?
And that, I saw an email earlier this evening. I believe that we should have a draft report the beginning of December.
Okay, thank you.
I'm pleased to see we're using some of the LED beacons on a few of these. That's
Yes.
a great addition to it. As I mentioned to you earlier, the crosswalk at 4th and College, if we're looking at that, and you mentioned that
Yes.
it's in the other program for the
Right,
4th
that
Street.
will be, 4th and College, I believe, is included with the 4th Street infrastructure project. We'll be going back out to bid towards the end of December with that project.
Any other questions from council? Any questions from the public?
None, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve A3.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you very much. Go to item A4.
I know, Brett, we talked about this before, and I still think it's a hell of an idea, but I just want to make sure that we're not talking about specialized vehicles, right? These are just
These are your
commute vehicles. Or
most of your staff cars or command vehicles is what we're going to focus on, or public safety vehicles that we're going to. So like your chief vehicles for fire, a lot of their vehicles are about 20 years old. So we'll start with those first, and then start working our way down to other vehicles that are highly used.
I was in that meeting also. I personally don't think it's a great deal. I think it's an all right deal, but I think we're better off just purchasing some of the vehicles as we were, selling them off at 7-8 years rather than going through the leasing process. Okay. Any other questions from council? Vice Mayor Clower?
I'll be completely honest. I don't think I understand this whole program well enough to actually vote for it and the scope of what we're looking at. So, if depending on what everybody else thinks, I think it'd be something good to come back and study on a little bit,
Okay.
just to get a little bit more detail on it, and to
That's
kind of
fine,
see how many vehicles we're planning on doing to start off, and what's our end goal in terms of total numbers.
Yeah, we can ask them to come for a special meeting or something like that.
Yeah, we have a special meeting kind of geared for the growth management stuff on December 11th. We can certainly take the first 15 minutes or so and go through this and provide you with a detailed report of what we were thinking. But as Brett mentioned, most of our priority vehicles were our public safety vehicles first, our command staff vehicles generally at the fire department and some other things. But we can make sure that we give you exactly what you feel comfortable with and voting. So.
And then if we could get like a little breakdown, it might even be in here, of how old each vehicle is and kind of
the list
what
of our
it's
current
costing.
inventory. Yeah, we have that.
And I think I've seen it before, but the main thing is just identifying which ones that we're planning on addressing with this
And with
this
the
first
initial,
program.
yeah, with the first part. Okay.
Yeah. And then we probably help for that session. Do you know where you would lean more towards the 50,000 or 100,000, depending on the deal, or that would be more of a decision at that time?
I think it'd probably be better to be deciding at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd want to see how many vehicles we're talking about, and it's kind of a pilot program, right? So we're trying to see. I got to see numbers before
Okay,
I can
no
really
problem.
give any direction.
These come with full maintenance, 24
Correct.
hours a day, right?
Correct, except for brakes and tires.
But there was a mileage requirement on that too, wasn't there?
I don't believe
A
so.
limit?
I'd have to look. I don't recall that.
That's one of the issues.
That's right. Attorney reviewed
me.
it.
Okay.
Correct.
Do we have any speakers on this item?
No, Mr. Mayor.
So is there a motion to continue to the December 11th?
Yes.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion to continue this item to December 11th.
Okay.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. We'll move on to item
Thanks.
A8.
Good evening.
I guess you can know what my question is going to be. Has the contractor that failed to do the runway the correct way been held responsible for this?
At the last meeting in closed session, you gave us some direction to move forward to hold him accountable. So the answer is no, he hasn't been. He's in the process of.
The $260,000?
Well, we're not sure that that's going to be the total bill. That's just going to be our portion of the bill. There's still grant monies that we'll be using to do the project because about $500,000 worth of work hasn't been completed yet.
Okay. So this just moves things along while we're waiting for him to.
This sets up the finances in position so that come March, we can get this going and get it done by May. So at your next meeting, I'm going to be bringing the plans and specs for your adoption, and then authorization to go out to bid. And then when you come back in February, you'll be looking to approve a project.
Okay.
Okay. Any speaker cards on this item?
No, Mr. Mayor.
I'll make a motion that we approve A8.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Move to item A10.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Go ahead, Mary. I'm never here to oppose any letter of support for anybody, especially services that are really direly needed in the community and the city. But sometimes when we do approve these letters of support, I like to see the people return and give us more information on how if they received the grant and how they're going to move forward on the grant. I see the application here or the support for San Benito Health Foundation for this grant. And in researching the grant, which I have done, there seems to be an amount, a pretty good amount that they could qualify for. But it does include the different services, especially because we're a rural community, a city. And I really believe that I'd like to move forward in support of this, but I also would like to request that the administrator of the San Benito Health Foundation come before the city council once in a while and report back on the funding that has been received as a service to the people in this community and this city, especially the most needed, issues on health. That she has a very good following from the community, and I really believe that a report once in a while would be good for the city. And
That's the only question.
that would be my comment.
Any other comments from council? Any speaker cards on this item?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, is there a motion?
Motion to approve A10.
All right.
Second.
The motion is second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. We'll move to item A12.
I'll try this. Do you have any specific questions, Council
Just
President?
an explanation or
Okay.
confirmation that this is going to be for legal services for the city of Hollister, and it's not just for a firm, but individuals as well.
Yeah, the way that it's being presented in draft form for the council to consider tonight, it's written that it can be either to an individual or a firm. The expectation is that once we get those proposals back from qualified individuals or firms, I would be submitting them to the city council for your review. Generally, staff's recommendation is for the council to look at 3 to 5 qualified firms/individuals, set up the interviews, and then of course, this individual works directly for the city council, but staff is here to help in that process and arranging the interviews and et cetera. So if there's some things that you would like to have changed on the RFP, if we can make a motion, we can certainly make that administratively before we send them out. If you're okay with it the way it is, it'll go out exactly that way.
And what is the time frame?
You know what? I apologize. I think we said, sorry.
Due back January 5th, 2018.
Right after the first, yeah.
The 1st of January.
Thank you.
All right. Okay,
Okay.
that's good.
Any other questions? Vice Mayor Clower?
Is that about the normal amount of time that we provide for these?
It depends on the. We can certainly make it longer. Given the holiday season is kind of why we went beyond the first of the year. But if you feel like additional time is necessary, again, please let us know what you feel comfortable with. Generally, we like to use at least a month for our professional consulting firms if they're doing parks or engineering work. But
It's probably fine then.
okay. We, if approved tonight, we'll try to. I'll work with Renee to start getting a list together. Again, another thing is that we have a list of contact firms that we can send that out to. If there are individuals that you would like us to get that to, the council's desire, make sure you get in touch with me, and I can get that to Renee, and we'll get these out before Thanksgiving.
Bless you. Okay. Is there any speaker cards?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve
Is there
A12.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Move to item A13.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that one more time? Motion second? Motion?
Motion by
Second.
Mickey.
Motion is second.
Motion second.
This is just a clarification. This is a wholesale distribution, not a retail.
Yeah,
What's
a wholesale.
the difference?
Yeah.
So wholesale distribution is business-to-business sales only, no direct business-to-consumer sales. So as a distributor, we will work with the cultivators who are licensed in Hollister. We can intake their product. We have to quarantine it, send it to a testing laboratory, make sure it meets the minimum state requirements, and then after it meets the minimum state requirements, we can take it out of quarantine and actually sell it to individual dispensaries and delivery services that are licensed within the state. That's our role, because the larger facilities can't sell directly.
You're in between the growers
Yes.
and the sellers.
Yeah, and we're actually a tax collector on the state side also. So
Okay, that was, I just wanted to make sure that was clear. That we weren't going with a third
Okay.
dispensary.
Any other questions or comments? Do we have any speaker cards on that item?
Elia Salinas?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So I question this type of distribution. It's my understanding that the product is not going to be in Hollister. So are the sales going to be from another county, another city? Does that mean we get the sales so our next door neighbors are not going to get that sale? We want to be able to cooperate with all our neighbors, so I'm really confused. This business structure just confuses me. I think there's more questions than there are answers.
So as it was set up, and City Manager can clarify if I'm wrong here, all those that are licensed will be paying a tax for their gross sales. Retail will pay an additional tax. So this is going from distributor to retail outlet. They will be paying the tax the base tax. I think it was 5%, somewhere around there.
Yes,
To be paying on that. So we will not receive the retail sales tax, but we will have a wholesale tax too.
Unless the retail sales tax is
Here.
yeah.
Yes.
Point of sale is here.
Yeah, that's the point of sale.
Okay,
Here.
the point of sale, that was my concern.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
There are no more speakers, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion that we approve A13.
Motion. Is there a second?
Second?
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Move on to item B1.
Good evening. This is a resolution before the successor agency to approve a memorandum of understanding between the successor agency and San Miguel County to provide staffing services to the oversight board. The successor agency staff would be designated as the staff to the oversight board. Just in summary, when all the redevelopment agencies dissolved, each successor agency established an oversight board. The law requires in 2018 that those county with multiple agencies consolidate to one oversight board that is administered by the county auditor controller. Because we have just one successor agency, the county auditor controller can designate the successor agency as staff, and this would formalize that.
All right.
Is there any questions?
Any questions from council? Any speaker cards on this item?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Is there a motion?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll move to public comment. This is the time for anyone in the audience to speak on any item not on the agenda and within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council. Speaker cards are available in the lobby and are to be completed and given to the city clerk before speaking. When the city clerk calls your name, please come to the podium, state your name and city for the record, and speak to the city council. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes with a maximum of 30 minutes per subject. Please note state law prohibits the city council from discussing or taking action on any item not on the agenda. Do we have any speaker cards tonight?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Marty Richmond.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. I'd like to continue my discussion on the interim growth management program that was in front of you last meeting and will be back, I understand, on December the 11th. I don't particularly like this Reborn Measure U. I don't think it covers the things we talked about. It's generally recognized that we have an infrastructure problem here. I hear about it every day from all the public elected officials. But we don't have a way to get our infrastructure done except to have the developers do it. You might say, well, yeah, we can do a 1/4 cent sales tax or something. Okay, see you in 30 years or 40 years or whatever it's going to take to put together. We have a potential out there for getting this work done. And I don't see anything in the growth management program that really covers that well. I would rather have 500 homes where the developer has done significant infrastructure improvements for everybody in this city than have 100 homes and all they did was pay the impact fees, because we get nothing out of that. Now, we have a valuable asset for sale, and that asset is permission to develop. And we keep either giving it away or pushing it away or doing something. And the mistake we make often is to give people a legal entitlement before we've come to an agreement on what we're going to get in return. And we ask for very little. You don't get anything you don't ask for, that I assure you. If you low bid it, they're going to come back with an even lower bid. That's the way it works in the bargaining business. So I encourage you to make sure when you do this thing on December 11th that you get a portion in there that directs the city planners and the city staff to, before you give a legal entitlement to these developments that are just on that stage about to get it, to sit down and see what we can get in return. Because we don't have another option. I don't see anybody showing up at the front door with a huge check saying, here, go fix your roads, or go fix your recreation, or go fix your education. So those are the primary areas. There are many areas. It could be other things, but it's primarily transportation, which includes the roads and all the rest, and it's education. We don't have a post-secondary education facility, and it's recreation. And we should be asking for more. And I think that's important. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
There are no more speakers, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We'll go to D1, City Manager's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to give a brief report. I had an open sort of city hall. I spoke to the members on the Bonneview Road area over the weekend. They would still like to present a case to you, to the council. I've tentatively scheduled that for December 18th. That's the next meeting in which I'm going to have a full council. It's going to probably be a larger night. I would like to also get your permission to put the homeless shelters request for funding on that evening as well with a full council. And I believe that concludes my report this evening. So.
Are you going to bring pizza out that night?
For everybody? I guess.
It'll be a long night for everybody.
No, I have a few urgency ordinances that I need to have adopted by the council, which requires a 4/5 vote. So that's my next opportunity to get all that. So that's kind of why that night's going to be big.
Okay. We're going to move to item E1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item is a public hearing on the sewer rate, the user rates, and also impact fees. We've had this conversation now several times. The report is finally complete and ready for your adoption. I would be more than happy to answer any specific question as it relates to it, but essentially what we're asking is that the council adopt the report, authorize the staff to begin the impact fee collection on January 1 of 2018, have the septic hauling rates established immediately, and then also immediately begin the 218 process for rates. The 218 process requires the city to send out a mail-in ballot, and those ballots to be returned to the city of Hollister. We'll start that process immediately so that we can implement the new rates as quickly as possible. So.
Okay, is there any questions from council? This time we'll open it for public hearing. Do we have any speakers?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we're going to close public hearing. Is there a motion?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We're going to go on to item E2.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Good evening. As you know, the Planning Department is responsible for administering the city's land use planning and entitlement process, and also managing and coordinating the drafting and implementation of land use policies, i.e. the general plan and zoning code. The department also oversees the administration of the California Environmental Quality Act, otherwise known as CEQA. Beginning with submittal of an application, the division charges for its services, and it can be reimbursed for those services up to their full reasonable cost. The current planning fees, as identified in Exhibit B of your report, were adopted by the City Council in 2015, and now many of these fees are insufficient to cover the actual costs incurred in service provision. As indicated in your report, the division dedicates much of its time to two general areas. One, pre-application time spent on the front end of potential development activity, and two, reimbursable current planning service time, specifically the processing of development permits and applications. In addition, the department has substantially responsibility for provisions of information in response to the general public, the Planning Commission, special planning committees, the City Council, which not all of these activities are related specific to development proposals. Staff recommends that almost all planning fees be set at 100% cost recovery levels. One exception to this policy is the proposed appeal fee. Cities typically keep appeals fee well below actual cost to ensure the process is not limited by economic reasons. The second service staff recommends be subsidized is home care conditional use permits, again for economic reasons. The appeal fee is set at $300, and the home care conditional use permit for home care daycares with the state license is at $200. With this, staff recommends that the City Council adopt Resolution Number 2017-297, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Hollister establishing new user fees for the city's planning division. Are there any questions for staff?
Any questions from council? Councilmember Luna?
Yeah, can you explain a little bit the home care?
Sure.
Is that the current, or is that what you're proposing, the 200?
The 200 it's the current, Councilmember Luna. The home care is essentially for any home care provider that has a license with the community care licensing. The local office here, or the closest office, is San Jose. So they normally, somebody who wants to do daycare out of their home, they would apply for a state license for community with the State Department. And there's two types for home care. One of them is a small home care, which would allow to have 8 children or less, and the other one is a large, which is 9 to up to 14. Doesn't mean that they're going to have 14 children at one time. Usually that's not the case, but they can have up to 14 kids or children in their roster, in their home care. And so if somebody who wants to apply for a large family daycare, then the city requires that they go through a conditional use permit process, and that's the $200 fee. If it's a small daycare, if it's 7 or less, or 8 or less, then they don't have to go through the home care process. They go straight directly with community care licensing with the state, and we don't have to charge them planning fees for that.
So all these people that would go through this category, aren't they required to have state license?
They are. That's correct.
And are they required to be actually assigned to anybody in social services?
They are. The, community care licensing usually has the contact person, and as part of our requirement for a conditional use permit, Councilmember Luna, is that they provide us with their application that they submitted to the state, to community care licensing, and so within that application we show who is the person in contact, and normally if they have any questions they'll contact us as well, any type of concerns, and essentially because we also notify the public at 100 feet radius, mm-hmm. And normally we have concerns of people who may have dogs and are concerned that there's going to be a daycare that's going to be provided. Most of these daycares that apply for a large family daycare already have a small one, and so they had been operating for a long time, for many years, and so we tell them, look, you had a daycare that's been operating for 5 years already, with the state. Now they want to do a large family daycare, and that's why they're applying for the city. Any type of issue, noise, any type of issues, they have the right to contact community care licensing and their specific representative, and then they will follow up. And if there is substantial issues which require either revocation or rescinding the application of the conditional use permit, then they come to us, and then we can take that matter.
Yeah, that would have been my concern, to make sure that the city has some kind of documentation.
Yes.
On home care. Home occupation is totally different.
You got it. That's correct. Yeah, home occupation, anybody who wants to do a home-based business out of their home with certain limits. I mean, we such as somebody who wants to have office, yeah, they come to us. As long as the work is not being done out of their home, then they can come to us and we can give them a home occupation over the counter, essentially. But if it's, for example, if they want to do welding, things of that nature, that's not permitted at home. We can help them look for a site, but not at home.
And I think all of us up here have one time or another been called by neighbors on home occupation. So that would be my concern as well. They do have to go through an application process, right?
That's correct.
You do have a copy of that.
We do.
So
that's correct.
That was my question, my concern. Thank you, Abraham.
You're welcome, Councilmember Luna.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, this time we're going to open it for public hearing. Do we have any speakers?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, this time we're going to close it for public hearing. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Can I make a recommendation? If you could send us an update this, but reconfigure this so it's side by side on current and the new rates.
You got it.
Or the previous and the new ones, so we can
compare them.
Identify. Yeah, we can compare.
You got them.
If somebody calls us, we have a better answer for them.
You got them. We can do them side by side.
Exactly.
Exhibit A is a new one, and Exhibit B is the old one. But I can certainly do side by side and provide that.
Right, and then the percentage should change.
You got it.
Thank you.
Okay.
We're going to move on to item E3. Oh, I'm sorry. Is that the one we scratched out?
Yep.
No.
No.
F3.
No,
This
that was
is
that
E3.
one. Yeah.
E3.
Mr. Mayor, I need to recuse myself from this item as I recuse myself from the original choosing process or selection process. There you go.
Thank you.
So again, Mr. Mayor, this may be, I'm going to try to handle this for the city clerk this evening. The recommendation on the staff report is to actually set the appeal for December 4th of 2017. I think my recommendation is to actually, again, do this on December 18th when we have as many council members as possible to hear this particular matter. So
I think the issue, though, we have two that are recusing themselves.
Right, but I think Council Person Luna was available during the original thing, and she's not going to be here on the 4th. So in order for her to be available for this is why I would suggest that we
need the three of you to actually be
we
there.
do need you three.
Okay.
So, and the next time I have you three again is December 18th. So outside of the staff recommendation, we would recommend that you set the appeal hearing for December 18th.
Do you need a motion to continue that?
Yes, please.
So moved.
Let's check if there's anybody. Do you have any speaker cards?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Or do we? Okay, there's a motion.
Second.
Motion, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
The date will be set for December 18th.
Correct. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Move on to item F1.
I can go get Carson out.
Yes. Sorry.
It's just a minute longer.
I can. Anybody got a joke? Go ahead, Carlos.
Take a 5-minute break while you read that.
Figured he'd be back in a second. All right. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The item F1 is essentially the response to the grand jury report. As you can see with the attachment, there was some recommendations and findings that were set forth by the civil grand jury. The responses were essentially conducted by the police department and the animal control department. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I believe we have representatives here from both agencies. If not, staff recommends you authorize the city manager to sign the response to the grand jury report and submit immediately.
Okay, is there any questions? Any questions from council? Do we have any speaker cards on this item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Elia Salinas.
Good evening. I was really saddened when I saw the report, the letter today. I don't know who does what, and I should be more involved in this, and this is something that I'm actually going to commit myself to be involved in. There's a program, and I don't know if anybody on staff knows about it, but the founder of PeopleSoft was a major software corporation. It's his Duffield is his name. Anyway, he founded a nonprofit to establish facilities that will not euthanize any of the animals, and it's called Maddie's Fund. And they give out grants all the time, and I would really, really like to see the city staff reach out, and it's over $58 million that this has already have been given out across the country. They're based here in California, and I believe he pledged $1 billion for the protection of animals. And I would like to have, again, it's called Maddie's, and it's MADDIES fund.org. And I would like to see our staff or someone at the animal control reach out to them and file for some type of grants. And hopefully we can get full-time staff. Maybe it could become a facility where they're not going to euthanize any animals. I think that they're trying to reach to 2025, where across the country they won't be killing any of these animals anymore. And some of this funding could be helped so they could have adoption day once a month or every 6 months or something like that. From reading the report, it said that when they do go out into the public and they have some type of a truck or a trailer or something, that the adoptions actually do increase. So I think that if we got some funding, that we would be able to offer those services or those fairs more often to the community. I am going to reach out to the industry that I represent and asking them also that this was not something that I've looked at in any of the nonprofits, and I definitely want to look into our industry donating money to these nonprofits specifically to try to eliminate from all these innocent animals being killed. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
There are no more speakers, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from council? Is there, Vice Mayor Clower?
Yeah, I have I guess a comment on number 9, where it says no information can be found on behavioral tests because no records are kept about any tests being conducted. And then it reads, the City of Hollister and the Hollister Police Department agree with the findings. Staff has since worked on creating a standard behavioral checklist that is used and a copy is being kept. The only use for the record is to have proof that a behavioral test was conducted. However, it is unsure if keeping these records is required or worth the staff time. I think that at least in certain cases it's going to be absolutely worth the staff time to keep those records, just from some comments that I've heard recently. So I'd like to see us continue that and hopefully broaden that, at least with the animals that are being considered or may possibly be dangerous. I think that's a big thing, because when people who have their animals taken into the shelter because they may be dangerous, they need to see proof or at least a paper trail of what's happened, and I think that's really important. So I'd like to see that continue.
Okay. Any other comments?
Actually, on that, I can answer that if you want, real quick.
Go ahead.
So this is for the initial assessment, actually, for what you're referring to. There actually is a record for that, those things.
Councilmember Luna?
Yeah, I see where, I think that the recommendation right now made by Elia Salinas is something that we all look forward to in finding grants and looking out for our city and services. I think it would be wise for, city manager or someone in staff to follow up on that. I think it's very important that we do follow up. I read the report, and I was somewhat concerned at times at reading the report, but I don't know how many of us have really taken the time to go out there and walk in and visit the shelter. I know I have. You kind of want to walk out of there with all kinds of dogs and cats with you. But I think just before the holidays, too, a lot of people tend to think about adopting a pet. And so maybe it would be also wise to maybe open the doors to the public in a walkthrough or just on a Saturday or an afternoon where you can invite the public to come in. So that's just a suggestion, and I think it might work. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Clark?
Yeah, more of a philosophical comment, and I was just thinking about this as I was sitting up here. I think it's, obviously it's the reality, but it's very sad that the grand jury expects that volunteers are going to do a lot of the work, and the city expects that the volunteers are going to do a lot of the work. I don't know of another department off the top of my head where we don't expect volunteers to deal with the water or the wastewater or policing or code enforcement. I mean, I pick up trash when I see it, but I don't think the city expects me to do that, which we're essentially expecting that volunteers are going to come out of the goodness of their heart and do a lot of the stuff that isn't very fun. So obviously that's all commitment of resources and staffing. And I think we've gone that way a little bit. We've shown that. I think we added an employee in the recent past, and we may want to look at that again, just because when you read the grand jury report and it says that the people expect that volunteers are going to do it and we don't have enough volunteers, well, we probably shouldn't be leaning on volunteers that much that they're an integral part of what we're trying to do. But that's a philosophical idea.
Thank you very much. Okay, is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. We'll move to G1, reports from city council members regarding their committees. Councilmember?
No,
F2?
F2.
We skipped F2. I'm sorry. I saw him here earlier, so.
Okay. F2.
Good evening. This next item is requesting approval for amendment number 6 to the professional services agreement with Development and Public Finance LLC to assist the city in preparing the appropriation report and annual report for Community Facilities District 1 and Community Facilities District 3. This proposal would allow DPF to assist the city in preparing different reports regarding CFD 1 and CFD 3. Are there any questions?
Any questions from council? Do we have any speaker cards on this item?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion, is there a second? Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Thank you. Now we'll go to G1, reports from city council members regarding their committees. Councilmember Luna?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, on Wednesday, November 8th, I attended the handbag meeting in Marina, and it was a very nice meeting. I think just about everybody was there, and so we don't have any meetings until the beginning of the year.
Okay. Councilmember Front?
No, I have no report.
Vice Mayor Flower?
I have nothing to report.
I attended the COG special meeting the other night. We're discussing on how we can work together with the community, the county, San Juan Bautista, to see if we can find a way to widen Highway 25 and do some of the major improvements we need to do throughout the community. Also, how we can work on some of the issues with our current existing road problems. We had about 20 people show up at that meeting, which is great. We're going to be planning future meetings on Saturdays and more in the evenings, so all of you can come out. We really do need everyone in the community to participate. It's a big task. We're looking at $300, $400 million if we're really going to fix our roads here. And it's just not going to happen without the public being involved in it. So I do want to thank all those that did make the time and all the staff that put the presentation together. And we will update you on those future meetings. We're going to go to item 2, informational reports from City Council. Councilmember Luna.
Thank you. I attended the grand opening or the opening ceremony at the Career Technical Education Building at San Benito High School on Tuesday, November the 7th, and glad to see Chief Westrick there and other community leaders. There was quite a few people. Must have been about 200 people there that showed up. It was a very nice ceremony. And then on Saturday, November 11th, I attended the Veterans Breakfast, and Council Member Friend, you were missed. You were not there this year.
Wish I was there.
I know. We know where you were. And then I really want to thank Mike Chamblins for taking time out of his busy schedule. I went on an airport tour of the restaurant facility and with some people that seem to be interested in the facility. And that's a hope that maybe we can someday do something there. It would be a very nice place or restaurant at the airport. Abraham and Brian, thank you very much for taking me out on the West Side tour of housing developments. I think we spent about 2 hours, and it was interesting. And I just want to say that while I represent the district, and I found it very interesting just to go through so many streets and so many corners that people don't even know what is coming up in that area. So I'm really hoping that we will be able to take some of our community members out on that tour and for them to see themselves, not just to read about it, but look at and be part of the community. Look at what's coming up around the corner from your house. So I want to thank Abraham and Brian. Thank you very much. And Mary Paxton, Danny, and David Rupsik. I think I went on tours all month. I went on the Gateway tour on the signage, or what kind of signage we're going to have on the west side. And so that was interesting, being out on the highway for a while and in the streets. But I'm sure that eventually the west side is going to be, it was always our gateway into Hollister, and we will make sure it becomes that gateway again. I was glad to have been part of the public comment at San Benito High School board meeting because, after all, I think they're doing what is really true representation of our community by being inclusive of the community and having representation by district elections on their board. So I just want to mention that because I thought it was very important that they took the time to have all these meetings with the public, and finally they made a decision. So, Mr. Mayor, I have a concern, and I want to make sure that we bring it up again and address it, and that's standing business signs along San Benito Street businesses. I'm concerned that some of them may be right in the middle of the sidewalk, and so people have to go around into the business. So if we can work on that, and so I also wanted to mention that I will not be attending the meeting on December 4th. I will be out of the country. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may get some clarification, you were speaking of the A-frame signs that are in the sidewalks? Okay. So we spent prior to your being on council, we spent years working on A-frame signs. So really, we have some pretty good guidelines on how it's supposed to work. What we will do is I will make sure that our code enforcement department goes out and makes sure that they're placed in the appropriate location so that there's plenty of room or path of travel so that people can get around and they're located in the safest place possible. So we'll have to just run through and do a quick sweep again and make sure people are doing what they're supposed to be
And
doing.
thank you, because I really feel I'm concerned about it, because in watching some people, nowadays everybody walks with their phone in front of them, texting or something, and I actually saw a person bump into one of those signs. So I am really worried about that. Thank you, Bill.
I know.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. Every few years we have to update everybody how it does start to creep closer and closer to the center of the sidewalk. Councilmember Friend?
Oh, they get heavy. I just, excuse me. On a personal note, I just want to thank everybody for the cards and well wishes. I had a little glitch in the hiccup on my vacation. It worked out very well. No problems. I'm feeling fine. Good to go for another 50 years. I just wanted to thank everybody for the phone calls, the text messages, the wild rumors that were out there and everything. I did not have a heart attack. I did have a heart issue, but I did not have a heart attack. So I got a new pacemaker, so I brought more back from Hawaii than I took there. So I don't know if they're going to recall it, but you never know. So I just want to thank everybody for that.
Vice Mayor Clower?
Yeah, last week I attended the National Philanthropy Day dinner, and it was a really neat event. I think they honored somewhere between 40 and 50 people from different nonprofits here in the county. It was really neat. Dr. Armstrong was a keynote speaker, and it was a great event all around. I also had a goals planning session about 2 weeks ago. Didn't have the greatest turnout, but we did come up with some good ideas, and we'll be moving forward with those as I meet with department heads and eventually come up with a plan, at least for a legislative agenda for me for next year. And then I wanted to thank Brian, Mary, and the rest of the staff who put on the quarterly business breakfast meeting, which was pretty well attended for 7 o'clock in the morning, I thought. And then just want to tell everybody happy Thanksgiving, and hopefully you have some opportunity to enjoy some time with your friends and family.
Just want to remind everyone, tomorrow we're doing the ribbon cutting for the new homeless shelter. It's a year-round shelter. It's going to be at 1:30 on San Felipe in front of the county services building. Please come out. This is a project we've been working on for over 3 years now. It's finally here. So this is very exciting and big news. At 1:30 tomorrow, San Felipe. I don't know what the address is, but right in front of the county services building. All right?
It's roughly 1131 San Felipe.
Is that the address?
Yes, that's
Thank
the
you.
county buildings behind.
All right. City manager?
I have nothing to report this evening.
Okay. City attorney?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just one matter. I'm looking into a panhandling ordinance at the request of the police department, so potentially that may be coming down the pike. So this would be a no aggressive panhandling ordinance, technically.
Okay. Chief?
Yeah, two things. Just a reminder, December 2nd, we're going to have an adoption event for animals at the Garden Mark on Spring Grove. I believe that's going to be from noon to 4 p.m. And then, of course, this Saturday is Lights On, and we'll have fun at dusk that time. Hope you enjoy your Thanksgiving.
Thank you. City clerk?
I have nothing to report, but Chief, again, you said the adoption was when?
The adoption event will be at the Garden Mart, noon to 4 p.m. on December 2nd.
Okay. We're going to move to item G3, report on the Hollister Airport layout plan.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Tonight we're here to give you an update on the Hollister Municipal Airport layout plan. This is a FAA required document. It's a 5-year planning document for the airport. This is about 7 years down from when our last one got adopted. We just finished it, so that's why we're doing it now. This lays out all the major projects and everything else. And Matt Quick from Kaufman and Associates, who compiled the report, is here to give you an update.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and fellow City Council members. Again, my name is Matt Quick with Kaufman Associates, and we were involved and teamed up with the city in updating the airport layout plan for the Hollister Municipal Airport. Like Mike had mentioned, the ALP update is a planning document that's recognized by the Federal Aviation Administration. The FAA recommends that airports update their ALPs on the average of every 5 to 7 years. So this is certainly a timely update of what's going on out at the Hollister Municipal Airport. I've got a presentation here this evening. Can go into quite a bit of detail, and I'll try to keep it fairly brief because I think I'm just about the last thing between you guys and getting out of here and enjoying the rest of your evening. So just wanted to take kind of a high-level view of what's going on at the airport and what an airport layout plan update is. Several bullet points I have listed here on this presentation. Excuse me, and again, not to go into great detail, but this is a document that the Federal Aviation Administration or the FAA recommends that airports update on a fairly regular basis. It provides a visioning tool for the airport and for the city of Hollister as to what's occurring at the airport and what could happen and occur at the airport over the course of the next several years. And one of the ways to go about doing that is to look at the aviation demand forecast. There's a lot that goes on at airports across this country, and that's nothing different as to what's happening at the Hollister Municipal Airport. This airport sees a wide variety of aviation activities, anything from recreational, general aviation, pilots flying their aircraft in and out of the airport, to corporate business activity. Obviously, you're aware of the CAL FIRE Air Attack Base that's located at the airport from a security standpoint. There's a lot of different functions that make up the general aviation industry as a whole, and a lot of those functions occur right now at the airport, and throughout the course of this document, we're making projections as to what could occur over the course of the next several years. Like I'd mentioned, one of the final products of this is the airport layout plan approval through the Federal Aviation Administration. We are currently coordinating that document with the FAA and hope to get approval of that ALP here in the coming weeks. Another important component of this study that the FAA is really paying particular attention to has to deal with the airport's GIS, or Geographical Information System. It's a nationwide survey that the FAA is looking to update with airports, and it provides very strategic and important survey data as it relates to the airport and the approach surfaces at the airport, just to make sure that the facility is safe and secure. So as a part of this particular study, there was an AEGIS survey that was conducted and is also currently being coordinated with the FAA. So that just gives you a brief update as to what goes into this ALP narrative report. There's 80-plus pages. I think there may be a draft document sitting in front of you this evening, but there's a lot of information that goes into there. We start out kind of assessing the airport with what's currently happening, and like I'd mentioned, the airport is caters to a lot of different types of general aviation activity. This is a recent aerial that was shot at the airport earlier this year as a part of this study. The two-runway system, the primary runway, 1331, is over 6,300 feet long, so it's capable of accommodating a wide array of aircraft on the market today. There's also a crosswind runway at the airport. There's a lot of navigational approach aids to help increase the safety for pilots and passengers utilizing the airport. And then there's an array of landside facilities, whether they be aircraft storage hangars or larger hangars for business and corporate activities. And then the FBO terminal building that has several different types of services that it provides to the general aviation public, as well as I mentioned the CAL FIRE Air Attack Base. So just a lot of different facilities that make up the Hollister Municipal Airport and help cater to a lot of different demands that's put upon the facility from a GA standpoint. One of the important components of the particular study process was updating the forecasts. And this is something that we were scoped to do as a result of the study. It takes a look at the different types of activity over the course of the next 20 years. The FAA typically likes to see a 20-year planning forecast based upon historical trends, what's going on currently in the aviation industry from a national perspective as well as from a regional perspective. The main components for Hollister Municipal Airport in terms of forecasting aviation demand deal with the based aircraft, the number of annual aircraft operations, and then the critical design aircraft, which goes into the safety parameters that make up the airport in terms of the runway and taxiway system. So those are the three main areas that we focused on when we came up with an updated set of aviation demand forecasts for the airport. This next slide, if I can get this to, I think I'm going the wrong way with it. There we go. This next slide shows the fleet mix of aircraft nationwide. And I think this is important to pay attention to, and it certainly was as we came up with the forecast for the airport. This breaks it down into, like I'd mentioned earlier, smaller single-engine piston-powered airplanes that are oftentimes associated with recreational flying, rotorcraft or the helicopter activity, also getting into the larger turbine-powered aircraft, such as the turboprops and business jets. So this shows the number of aircraft in 2016 across the country, and then the 2022, 27, and 2037 parameters are the forecasts that the Federal Aviation Administration is projecting for these different types of fleet mix categories for aircraft over the next several years. What's important with this is the number of smaller single-engine piston-powered airplanes and multi-engine piston-powered aircraft are projected to decrease in the coming years or stay relatively stagnant. And then the largest growth segment that's being projected is in the turbine-powered aircraft that would deal with turboprop and smaller corporate jets. And I think it's important for Hollister, as it is for many airports of this size and stature, just because the airport has seen an increase in this type of activity catering to the business and corporate side of things in recent years. And according to the FAA, that's going to be the largest growth segment in the general aviation market over the next 15 to 20 years. And that was factored in as well as into our forecast, which I'll talk about just a little bit more here momentarily. From a based aircraft perspective, like I'd mentioned, that was one of the key components that we looked at. This particular exhibit shows the spread of based aircraft activity at the airport from a registered aircraft owner standpoint. So this is where the owners of the based aircraft at Hollister Municipal Airport are located in proximity to the city of Hollister, San Benito County, as well as Santa Clara County to the north. A large majority of the based aircraft ownership is obviously in proximity to the airport. That's typical of any airport. Proximity to the facility and the services that it provides is often one of the most important indicators for a based aircraft owner to base their aircraft at that facility. But it's also important to notice that the spread goes up into Santa Clara County and captures quite a bit of growth activity up into that area. So this would be considered what we would call the service area for the airport. It's not just the city of Hollister, but it's spread certainly well throughout San Benito County as well as areas to the north into Santa Clara County. So that was factored in when we took a look at the types of demand and potential based aircraft ownership at the airport over the next several years. This is a summary of the forecast demand that we came up with, and again, looking at it from the standpoint of based aircraft, annual aircraft operations. Toward the top of that exhibit, so currently the airport has approximately 140 based airplanes, and we're projecting over the course of the next 20 years that number could increase to upwards of just over 200 based aircraft. While smaller single-engine piston-powered aircraft will continue to dominate the fleet mix, we do expect there to be larger growth trends in some of the more sophisticated aircraft dealing with your turboprop, business jet activity, as well as helicopters, which again falls in line with some of the indicators that the FAA is putting out there, as well as what we're seeing from a regional perspective into the types of aviation activities that are occurring here regionally and the growth trends associated with those. So from an annual operations perspective, it's a little bit more difficult just because there's no airport traffic control tower at the airport that physically logs the amount of activity. With a lot of different indicators out there and the terminal area forecast that the FAA comes up with each year, it's projected that the airport averages about 45,000, or excuse me, actually it's just upwards of 50,000 operations in 2016. So that's a sizable amount of activity, and again, that includes anything from touch-and-go flight training activity up to the operations that are tied to CAL FIRE as well as business aircraft activity. So just over 50,000 operations is what was estimated for the base year of the study in 2016, and we're projecting over the course of the next 20 years that those operational levels could increase to upwards of around 75,000 operations annually. So again, significant number of operations, But that falls in line, and we feel like that's fairly realistic with what's going on in the trends in the aviation industry, as well as what's going on here regionally and locally to help support those different activity and demand indicators. Another component of the forecast that I talked about deals with the critical design aircraft. And this kind of goes away from the number of operations and deals more specifically with the type of operations. What type of aircraft are operating at the Hollister Municipal Airport? I'm not going to go into great detail on these particular exhibits, but this just shows a breakdown of how the critical design aircraft is classified for the airport. And just the short of it is the critical design aircraft is the most demanding airplane in terms of its approach speed as it comes into land, as well as the wingspan of the aircraft. So the larger the critical aircraft, the larger the safety area design parameters must be for the runways and taxiway system. So this next slide shows a breakdown of the different types of aircraft and those particular design categories that would fall into that. I can tell you that currently that category B2 is what is considered the critical design aircraft for the Hollister Municipal Airport today. And again, that B2 category is made up of a wide range of aircraft dealing with the S2 air tankers that CAL FIRE flies and bases out of here for a certain amount of time each year, as well as turboprop activity, smaller business jets. They would all fall into that B2 category. We're projecting over the course of the next several years that the airport could transition to a C2 category. And basically the difference between the B2 and C2 is it's just a larger business and corporate jet that could operate at the airport on a more regular basis. The critical design aircraft is defined as an aircraft that operates at least 500 times a year. So an operation at the airport is one takeoff or one landing. So it doesn't take that much to actually get up to aggregate of 500 operations a year by a critical design aircraft. But this is the categories that we're focusing on for the airport in the future. This is not a new planning standard that the airport is now adhering to. The current airport layout plan that's been approved in recent past or over the course of the last several years from the FAA does classify the airport as an existing B2 and an ultimate C2. So we feel that that's prudent planning on the part of the city to plan facilities such as that over the course of the next several years for these particular design standards. And this is just an example of some of the different types of aircraft that fall into those particular categories. Like I'd mentioned, right now there's several different types of aircraft that fall within that B2 category. And then there's also some aircraft on this chart that fall into the C1 and C2 category that we would expect the airport to cater to more in the future as business and corporate activity continues to grow nationally as well as regionally. This particular exhibit just shows the differences in design standards. Like I'd mentioned, based upon the critical design aircraft, the safety design standards for the runway and taxiway system is integrated into that particular design. This particular exhibit just shows what those design dimensions would be for the ultimate C2 category of aircraft as it would relate especially to the primary runway that's 6,350 feet long and is capable of accommodating those types of aircraft. These next couple slides, I'm not going to go into detail on these. These are just a breakdown. When we look at the airport, we focus on really two components, the air side and the land side. The air side is the focal points, obviously, the runway and taxiway system and the types of navigational approach aids that are accommodating on the airfield for particular aircraft as they come into land. And then the land side deals more specifically with aircraft storage hangars, terminal facilities, the amount of aircraft parking apron space, so on and so forth related to those landside components. This exhibit just breaks down the existing and potential improvements that would be needed to the air side over the course of the next several years. And then the next exhibit to follow does the same thing with the land side perspective, again looking at it from the standpoint of the amount of hangar space that's currently at the airport and what could be projected over the course of the next several years to meet based aircraft demand as well as aircraft that are flying in and out of the airport for business purposes. And it goes into other things related to terminal facilities, aircraft parking, so on and so forth. The culmination of all this information that I've talked about so far is really summed up in this particular exhibit. And this is the recommended development concept for the airport over the course of the next several years. An ALP narrative report focuses on the 5-year time frame or the short term especially from the standpoint of the capital improvement program. But this particular exhibit shows what the airport could be over the course of the next several years. Obviously, well beyond the 5-year time frame, and in a lot of instances, even looking 10 to 20 years out. So again, from an airside perspective, I think one of the key projects that we've identified for the airport to be able to accommodate that C2 category of aircraft in the future would be to recapture some of the existing runway length that's on the south side of the primary runway, and being able to ultimately extend that runway to upwards of 7,500 feet. The pavement's just there. The airport's recently, as you're aware, went through a pretty significant runway reconstruction project in recent past. That amount of pavement on toward the south end of that primary runway was included with that pavement reconstruction. So it'd just be a matter of recapturing some of that for ultimate use for aircraft as they would take off and land at the airport in the future. We also show some other improvements. The Federal Aviation Administration has really cracked down in recent past on making sure the airfield is as safe as possible, and they've implemented a lot of what they call airfield geometry standards, and that just basically takes the taxiway system and making sure it adheres to proper entrance-exit points on the runway system. So we do show some improvements to airfield geometry on the runway that would be considered some pretty high-priority projects as it relates to future grant funding potential for the airport. This next exhibit just goes into more detail and actually coming up with a list of projects that's identified in the capital improvement program. These projects are currently being coordinated with the Federal Aviation Administration, and they do show up on the airport layout plan drawing set. We've broken it into 2 phases. The first phase is the short term, or the next 5 years, and again, identified several projects. A lot of these projects are tied together, like I'd mentioned earlier, with airfield geometry updates, recapturing some of that runway length for ultimate use for aircraft as they take off and land at the airport. And then we also take it a step further and look at what we consider the ultimate planning period, stuff that's beyond the 5-year time frame that could be over the course of 5, 10, 12 years out. So several projects that are listed there. A lot of these projects are going to be tied to demand, and if the demand is there in the future and the city can provide justification for those projects, and the FAA would entertain allowing grant funding eligibility to help improve those projects at the airport. Some of these projects are safety related as well, which are going to be very high priority projects with the FAA. A lot of those dealing with trying to recapture some of that runway length, also the airfield geometry standards that I talked about, which a lot of those are outlined in the short-term planning program. And then the next slide just takes this development staging exhibit a step further, and this is the actual capital improvement program. It outlines the specific projects in the short-term planning horizon, and we did come up with cost estimates for these projects and broke those out from the standpoint of federal funding, state funding, as well as the airport/local share. All the projects in the short-term planning program are eligible for FAA funding assistance. Upwards of 90% of each project would be eligible from an FAA standpoint. And then Caltrans Aeronautics Division, they also provide a matching grant for the federal projects. So they'll match up to 5% of the federal share. And then that leaves basically just over 5% of the total project cost would be the responsibility of the city and the airport in terms of helping to fund these projects. So over the course of the next several years, the short-term program identifies about $11.9 million in potential projects at the airport. Of that total, over $10.5 million of that would be eligible for FAA funding, and then the remaining would be almost split down the middle between Caltrans Aeronautics as well as the city or airport local share match. And then this is just the ultimate planning horizon. Same thing, identifies some projects. More of these are going to be demand-based and not so much safety-related as in the short-term projects. But the total project amount for all this capital improvement program identified in this particular project is just over $26 million. And again, like I'd mentioned, a large chunk of that is going to be eligible for FAA federal funding assistance. And then the state and airport local share, you can see those two matches in the middle of that particular exhibit. And this is the final slide. This is just a depiction of that airport layout plan drawing set. The ALP is not as pretty as a lot of the exhibits we have in this. This is a very technical set of drawings, but this is the actual drawing set that's recognized by the FAA. So any potential projects to occur at the airport in the future must show up on this ALP in order for the FAA to entertain the idea of helping to fund projects from an airport improvement program grant match. So like I'd mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation, we are currently working with Mike and his staff and have coordinated the airport layout plan drawing set with the FAA for their review. We're getting comments back from them right now, and we're in the process of continuing to coordinate with them, and hopefully we'll have an approval of this document from the FAA here in the coming weeks. So with that, that is all I have. I'd be happy to help answer any questions that you might have this evening. So thank you for your time.
Very good presentation. Do we have questions from council? If I can ask you the C2 type of aircraft.
Yes.
We are currently seeing a few of those come in.
You are. Yes, that's correct.
But did I hear you correctly saying if the runway was lengthened, we'd see more of that traffic?
More than likely, yes. Yeah. Currently, the airport does see that C2 category. You know, a good example of that would be some of the larger Cessna Citation jets, Challenger jets that the airport sees on a regular or semi-irregular basis right now. We're projecting that over the course of the next several years for that number to grow, and that's what would push the airport into that C2 category. Adding additional runway length at the airport would certainly help accommodate those aircraft. They can operate in and out of the airport right now, but they're somewhat restricted from a weight and useful load standpoint, especially when the temperatures are higher and the density altitudes are higher during the summer months. So that additional runway length would certainly accommodate some of those aircraft in the future.
So that you feel would add more aircraft coming in of that type or larger?
Correct, yes.
That final goal of $26 million incorporates all those designs. Something like that, what would that do to the airport as far as activity? I mean, if you were to do something like this in the next 5-10 years, what kind of difference does it make to the airport as far as the traffic coming in? Are you going to see something even larger than the C2 category, or?
That's a great question. I do believe that you would certainly see activity at the airport that would be more business related in terms of, again, corporate business activity, contributing to the local economy. The airport right now sees aircraft larger than that C2 category. It's just on a very infrequent basis. But that additional runway length and being able to enhance the airfield from a safety standpoint to be able to make the airfield more enticing and attracting to those business operators, I certainly would think that the airport would reap the benefits, as well as the local community, in terms of the types of activity that would be tied to those business itinerant operators coming in and out of the airport. Yeah. Mike, I don't know if you'd have anything to add to that from the experience that you've seen there.
Well, the sole limiting factor for us is the strength of the pavement. With the reconstruction, we can handle more weight than we could in the past. Currently, we're at the same weight as a 737, so that's as big as an aircraft as we could go. We couldn't go any bigger than that.
But are you hearing some of those coming in asking for a longer runway at this point, or?
The reason why, so Matt keeps saying extend the runway, and technically we are extending the runway. We're adding no new pavement. Basically, it's a paint job. Down there where that section in yellow is at the south end of the runway, currently there's a yellow line down the center, which means taxiway. And those are called lead-in taxiways or taxiway preceding the runway. They were done in the past. They're no longer standard. So the FAA wants it to go away. Our main concern for getting this project done sooner rather than later is CAL FIRE. CAL FIRE currently starts their takeoff roll at the edge of pavement. Those tankers are heavy. They need as much room as they can. Technically, by the letter of the law, if they were taking off from the end of the pavement, that would be illegal. So they are conducting a fast taxi up to the threshold where they could take off. And by fast taxi, I mean 15 miles an hour, because those things take a little while to get going. So they don't hit the air until taxiway echo, which is way down there. So that is our main goal in getting that change from a displaced threshold to a relocated threshold. But literally, we are talking about a paint job. Instead of having a yellow line, you're going to have the white arrows, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we take out the yellow line and we put in white arrows. And then we have to move some lights. All these projects are extremely important. In fact, earlier in the meeting, you approved this project list as our project list for the future. And we're already starting to work on the parallel taxiway there that you see, the section you see in yellow, near the CAL FIRE, proposed CAL FIRE base in white. So we are well on our way to get things done.
Good presentation. Thank you. I do appreciate all this information. Councilmember Luna?
Now, what about securing the funding, the grant funding? How would that work? Do you have a time frame as to when you could apply, or?
So it is programmed, and it's not a typical grant process with the FAA. It's more of a negotiated brokered settlement. So not only do you want to do the project, but they want you to have to want you to do the project. That's why when Matt pointed out, this is a safety issue, they get top priority funding, and then some of the stuff doesn't. So I don't ever speak for the FAA and how the funding is. I can tell you that we're programmed for the next 2 years to get that taxiway done and get some of the geometry straightened out. As far as funding goes, I met with Brett. The airport has the matching funds already in the bank, even if Caltrans doesn't contribute their portion, because Caltrans has been kind of off and on. Some years they give us the grant, some years they don't, depending on what the state budget's like. There will be a resolution come to you at the next meeting to allow us to apply for a $300,000 Caltrans grant on that taxiway side of things. So the way the projects are structured and everything, there is a good likelihood that we will get the grant funding. The way the airport finances are structured, we always will have our matching funds, which is the most important thing. Many, many, many airports wind up doing all the work getting up to the project, and then they don't have the money to match the grant, and they have to abandon it. And we've actually benefited from that on 3 separate occasions because we had that money in the bank. We got the grants, and other people didn't.
Good, excellent. Do we have any speakers on this?
Elias Linus?
Good evening again. Having had a business out at the airport, I'm certainly on board with trying to do something that we've been talking about for decades to improve the airport. However, this report really sounds too good to be true, and I really, really want to be true, and I want to increase the business out at the airport. With regards to the grant money, I don't want to end up like the fire department. The fire department assumed that they were going to get the grants money, and we all know what happened with that. So instead of making some kind of a commitment, let's make sure that the money is there from the grants and not beforehand and making promises or assuming we're going to get the money. If you're going to approve this project, is there anything, I didn't see anything in there because right now it's my personal opinion that there's a monopoly on the fuel out there, and I would like to have some more competition for fuel being provided out there. Also, one of the other things is with regards to extending the south portion, does that further restrict the height for any industrial buildings on that south side? I know that there's plans out there for some type of building, industrial buildings, and I know that there's a height requirement. So if the airport extends further south, is that going to restrict for the height even further? And also, I know that the mayor and I have both had questions with regards to existing tenants. Is that a garage that they have out there with them, or do they have actually an operating crafts in those facilities that they're renting right now to the city? Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no more speakers, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay, hang on 1 second. Fuel, building height, hangar contents. So as the fuel thing, if the speaker would like to go into the fuel business, come visit me. There's nothing saying that there's a monopoly at the airport. Just need a proposal, and I'm sure we can work something out.
So just so we're clear on that, so if another company came in and said they wanted to open a fuel depot there, there's no
Nothing.
restrictions. We wouldn't say, no, we already have one person.
No,
So someone
absolutely
could do
not.
It. Okay.
In fact, in the long-range planning of this document, the city's going into the fuel business as one of the projects. And that's to deal with one of our worst liabilities out there. Currently, we own the underground tanks, and if anything goes wrong with them, the airport would be on the hook at just handing a check over to the operator every month for lost business until we get the tanks replaced. So what I'm proposing is we put in an above-ground tanks fuel farm, so if anything happened during the life of that agreement, we could just hand them the keys to the other fuel farm and avoid that situation altogether. That, of course, is key, and that is the key reason why CAL FIRE needs to move. Because the CAL FIRE facility over there, we've already got the secondary containment in place to handle the above-ground fuel farm. So there's a lot of little moving chess pieces that are being held up by the one chess piece of CAL FIRE making the move that they committed to over 10 years ago when they signed the lease and said that they're going to build that base. As for building height restrictions, the extension is only for takeoff, not for landing, so it would not affect any of the existing restrictions out there. It's strictly a takeoff, 7,500. But as far as the landing goes, the threshold would stay the same, and they have to land at the same distance from those buildings, so there would be no change in the height of the restrictions. And as far as the contents of the hangars go, the hangars are inspected every year. Every hangar is photographed. The contents are checked to make sure they comply with our regulations. And yes, some tenants have been asked to leave because they didn't have the proper things in their hangars. I assure you, as of 5 years ago, everybody has the proper thing in their hangars.
That being a plane?
That being a plane. Or plane parts.
All right. Any other questions from council? Thank you again for the update. All right. H, I, J, and K, there's no business.
For adjournment.
Mr. Mayor, before we adjourn, the city has lost another former mayor, former city council member, former finance director, Mary Kuchenbaker, passed away in Florida. And her daughter informed me that, that she had passed away. So in her memory, I'd like to adjourn Mary Kuchenbaker.
Okay. So motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Thank you, everyone.
That was a better one than I thought.